Hey, USA. It's just me, and as you know, I'm nobody, just an American, and this is Just an American Moment. This is the podcast where we ask the questions the mainstream media won't ask. We provide the answers and solutions the political class either can't or won't provide. So, we're going to go a little bit different direction today than I've gone in prior weeks, and we're going to talk about some of the news, but we're going to talk about it from the perspective of how the mainstream media delivers it to us. You know, there's the news that they think we just need to know, and they put it out there. And then there's the news that's out there that they kind of portray as being interesting, but don't really think we need to know the details. And I think you'll find the contrast pretty interesting. So let's really just kick it off by talking about the news they think we need to know. And I can tell you one of the most important stories of the week that I heard of was the result of getting an alert on my phone. And I was wondering, well, what the heck is that beep all about? And I grabbed my phone and looked at it. And folks, I'll tell you, this story was so important. They told me that Ellen DeGeneres was going to discontinue her show in 2022. And of course, my first reaction is, I care why. why why is the media so engaged with self-absorbed entertainment figures? Seriously, do we really care that Ellen DeGeneres is canceling her show? I mean, seriously? Oh, but the news had a better story, and they got one up as the week went on. This is something we all needed to know. Bill Gates is seeing his marriage end because he had an affair. Now, this is really pathetic. And quite honestly, why is it anybody's business? Man's been married for many years, he and his wife. They've done some good things. They've done some things that I don't necessarily agree with, but fundamentally, they've done some good things. If they have personal issues in their marriage, that should be between them. But the media just craves this kind of stuff. And they forget these people have children, but they're going to expose them all this? Why? Why? Now, I know Gates is kind of a public figure, but even so, what does this have to do with anything? And more importantly, why do any of us need to know about it? It's absolutely ridiculous. But there they are. And this has been going on for already a few days. And I'm sure we're going to hear, a lot more about it. Now, the third big story, and this one really kind of cracks me up, is, and this went on for already, 5 days, 6 days last week? Liz Cheney is going to be removed from the number 3 spot in the GOP. I mean, do most Americans even know? And the ones who know, do we care? You have a woman in a party who, for the past 5 months, has done nothing but belittle and criticize and antagonize a former president. To what end? Does she forget that 73 million people voted for the man? 73 million people in her party, or at least independents? And she's out there criticizing them, showing up on every freaking news show there is so she can badmouth the guy. Again, to what end? What does she think that she's going to accomplish? If you were a believer in Trump, you're going to continue to be a believer in Trump. If you disagree with Trump, you're going to disagree with Trump. Liz Cheney, this is all about her ego. And quite honestly, it isn't news. We don't care. It's kind of funny, actually, that they didn't put Stefanik on these shows to ask her what she's going to do with it in her new position. Instead, they want to focus, as they normally do, on the person who's bitter. And actually, Cheney kind of annoys me the way a lot of things in the media annoy me, or I should say, really in politics annoy me. And that's this whole idea of political dynasties. I mean, her father, and I kind of liked her father, particularly in his early days, was in government. Then she follows in government. So you got the Cheney name in government. And is this any different than the Kennedys, who believed every member of their family should be in politics? That they could go as far as actually committing a murder and get off of it because they're a political dynasty? Even the Bushes, and I kind of like the Bushes, especially H.W. But the fact is, I don't want to see dynasties. And then you got the Clintons. It's bad enough you had Bill, and then you get Hillary, and there's talk about Chelsea possibly running for something. Poor Chelsea, who got a $600,000 job right out of Stanford. I bet lots of us want that. But this is my whole point. Didn't we break away from England because we didn't want any parts of dynasties? And it gets worse. Take a look at somebody like Debbie Dingell. I mean, the Dingell family has held that seat for 90 years. There was Debbie's husband's father. Then Debbie marries a guy who's 30 years older than her. He dies in office. And she gets elected. Come on, folks. That's on us. Or it's certainly on the people of, Michigan? I mean, 90 years in the same family. And you see the same with the Republicans. Lisa Murkowski is another example of that. And, I'm sure we're going to see, by the way, a Pelosi show up when mom passes. And probably we're going to see the emergence of Hunter Biden. Can't you see it now? Joe goes to meet the lilies of the field and suddenly Hunter Biden is redeemed. It's getting pretty awful. Anyhow, I'm on a tangent. So the last and big story of the week, actually next to the last big story, I apologize. This next story of the week is 3 people are stabbed on the New York subway. 3 people are stabbed on the New York subway. First of all, will somebody tell me why the media can only talk about things in New York and Washington, D.C.? They make local stories in New York and D.C. like they're national news. I can tell you where I live, every morning you turn on TV and you hear about the number of people who are shot or stabbed or killed, murdered, in my area. And I'm not even in Chicago. They don't even report about Chicago. You get 50 people shot in Chicago. You might get a passing note. 50 people were shot in Chicago. End of story. Unless it's a racial story. Then it becomes a national story and it's blown out of proportion again. This is all nuts, but this is what drives the media. And the last non-event, as far as I'm concerned, of the week was when the CDC lifted the ban on masks. I mean, hey, CDC, nice that you could finally catch up with the rest of the country, because guess what? We haven't all been wearing masks outside. Do you think we're crazy? Maybe so. But the fact is, you're so far behind the rest of the country, it's unbelievable. And yet you still continue to make our children suffer. And God knows how long this is going to continue. But folks, those were the big headliners this week. This is what talkie shows just couldn't resist talking about. And that's kind of nuts. All right, now let's move on to another area. Let's talk about stories that really, as far as I'm concerned, didn't get overwhelming attention this week. But before I get to those stories, I want to know, does anybody remember that 5 months ago, we didn't have a crisis at our border? Does anybody remember that 5 months ago, we didn't see gas prices going up? We didn't have an oil crisis. We weren't dependent on anyone for fuel. Does anybody remember Russians hacking our critical infrastructure 5 months ago. Um, no, people remember Russian collusion. Ha ha ha. Does anyone remember our closest ally, Israel, being attacked? If I'm not mistaken, I think there was something called the Abraham Accords, which were striving for peace in the Middle East. So, unbelievable. Does anybody remember 5 months ago the Chinese government lecturing us? So, I ask you, America, what changed in the last 5 months? I'm sure you can figure it out. So, now let's move to the stories of the week that the media really was kind of blasé about. One of the ones, and I apologize for reading off my little list here, but I do have them. This one really got me. The President of the United States, on multiple occasions last week, in front of a U.S. audience and in front of the media, goes out and he says, "Oh, they told me I shouldn't answer questions," or, "Oh, I'm going to get in trouble if I answer these questions," or, "Oh, they want me back inside. I have to leave now." And the scariest one of all is when he was asked if he knew that the Colonial Pipeline paid the ransom to the Russian hackers. And he said, "No comment." Do you know, for the most part, the media has ignored all these comments? This is the President of the United States. The President of the United States. Does this concern anybody else? Because it scares the crap out of me. And don't you wonder who they are? Who are they? Who's pulling the strings of the President of the United States? I mean, what the hell is going on? What are we to expect for the next 4 years? Who are these people? You telling me the President of the United States now can't ask or answer a question without getting permission? And are you telling me the media doesn't want to know why? Doesn't ask why? This is really, really concerning. Okay, another subject of the week that the media barely covered is how tepid the president has been on Israel, making a comment like Israel has a right to defend itself is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. They're our closest ally in the world, and Israel has a right to defend themselves, and the media doesn't respond. Instead, what the media responds to is the whole Palestinian situation and how they're being the victim. And the media doesn't even pick up at any length about the real division within the Democrat Party over the Israel-Palestinian situation. They don't show the rift that exists between Tlaib and AOC and Ilhan Omar and more conservative or more moderate Democrats. Not a word. We don't hear about the rift, but they're constantly talking about the Liz Cheney thing and the rift in the Republican Party. Go figure. You got to wonder. Okay, the other thing, or the other story. 4 little girls on the border, left in the desert to die. And the media doesn't investigate? They don't wonder why? They don't raise the question as to whether the policies on the border are working? No one wants to do. No one does any follow. Where are these kids going? Where are their parents? What's happening? I'd like to know, but not a word. Not a word. And the last one, as it relates to the border, is the fact that they had one group alone, of 20 Romanians who flew from Europe to Mexico and came across the border illegally. And the news doesn't say anything. Wouldn't you think there's kind of a story there? Why did these people go through all that trouble to get into Western Europe, fly fly to Mexico and cross our border illegal. Romanians. And what's going to be the attitude towards them? They're going to be returned, they're going to be sent home, or they're going to be admitted. Or is it only Central American people who are going to allow to be enter the country, but not people from Eastern or Western Europe? Got to wonder, and you got to wonder why the media isn't asking the question. I'm nobody, just an American. That's all. That's only who I am. But these stories are the whole reason that I wrote my book, and these stories are the reason that I do this podcast now. Because I can't believe I'm the only one out there asking the questions and looking for answers. And we're not hearing them. So I ask you, America, think about it. And think about the people also in elected office. It was Thomas Jefferson who once said, the government you elect is the government you deserve. So with that, and with my dog barking in the background, I want to say, please help me out. Buy the book, not because I want to sell a lot of copies. I want people to read it, to recognize that they're nobody, just an American. But that means something. Thanks very much.